Hey, readers and listeners, welcome back to Yvonne Wakefield, the author, reading from the Babe in the Woods series. I've been reading from book 1, but I also want to let you know that book 2 and 3, which you can see right here, are available anywhere you can find books to buy. And you can also follow the development on the YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do tonight is read chapter 3, which of course is a continuation of chapter 2. We get into maybe a little more darker stuff. There are some pictures. I'll stop and show it to you. So get your favorite libation. Mine is this kind of like watered down scotch and soda at this time of night. Settle back and listen. And here we go. Chapter 3, entitled, Are You My Mother? Now remember, I just have to remind you. So chapter 2, I just got to the property and I was with a realtor. So the realtor and I are standing up on this mountain. He must be cooking, I think, as Robin the realtor stands beside me on a high serpentine ridge. I'm sweltering in shorts, sandals, and a rose-colored jersey halter top. My bare back fries under the late morning sun. Robin wears a cowboy hat, long-sleeved shirts, and boot-cut jeans. He looks cool. Cleanly shaven, with a face like Neapolitan ice cream, white forehead, pink nose, and chin burnished brown by sun skirting the shade of his brim. Robin agreed to work with me after I repeated, as I had to others, I want to buy land with a creek and virgin timber. Of the other 3 men in the John Day office, Robin was the only agent to look me seriously in the eye and not at how I looked as a teenage girl in cutoffs. The evening before I stood beside Robin on a ridge, I stayed at the Clyde Holiday State Park, a sanctioned campsite west of John Day. In the evening, I washed and rinsed my hair in the public bathroom sink, then zipped myself inside the little tent and lay awake anxious. Not because of what Robin was to show me, property, the next morning, but because of what was happening outside. Headlights, taillights, flashlights, and voices. Instead of lying awake thinking about buying land, I was thinking about my safety among strangers and the fact that I was a stranger among people. In my time on the road, I'd camped in places so far from humanity there weren't even litter, and I'd grown accustomed to this aloneness. By the time I finally fell asleep in Clyde Holiday State Park, so had all the other campers. Strangely, in the familiar dark and quiet, my sweet dreams aired on the side of a man with an axe and blood running like water through my clean, long, brown hair. At sunrise, I packed up the tent, still wet with dew, washed in the vacant public restroom, and facing a buffed steel mirror, tried to comb damp snarls out of my hair. Something in that park, maybe it was all the trucks with gun racks or my discomfort around voices and lights, had given me the heebie-jeebies. I had a faint premonition there was danger out there, yet, like my sleepy reflection in the dim bathroom mirror, I had not clearly faced it. Lit check. I loaded the last of my gear and then steered out of the manicured park, gravel popping beneath my tires until I hit the highway. Despite a flannel shirt buttoned over my halter top, I shivered in the cool morning air. Now there isn't even a shaft of shade where we stood, and I wish I hadn't left my shirt on the seat of Robin's Jeep parked a quarter mile below. I turned from side to side to keep my back from burning in the low pre-noon sun shimmering off the ridge where I've naively followed this cowboy. Maybe he was the man in my dreams the night before. I fanned my long hair against my back and take a step away from Robin as he points back in the direction of 120 acres for sale. The distance I put between us puts me closer to the edge of a jagged outcropping. Looking down, I focus on the verdant draw of what Robin identifies as old-growth ponderosa, Douglas, red, and white fir, spruce, hemlock, bull pine, and tamarack, to name the predominant few trees. For now, I just think of them as trees, distinguished only by their variations of green. When I ask, "What's that sound?" Robin answers, "That's a crick." From this arid vantage, I listen to a creek, which can't be seen but echoes its way up the formidable ridge and rangeland that Robin wants to sell me. I'm interested in the land below that I can hear, but not the parched crest and ravines behind my back that Robin is trying to sell me. "What about that land?" I point towards the forest's draw. "It's not for sale," Robin says, and while I'm disappointed, I still ask him to show me this land not for sale. Robin drives me up in his scratched-up Jeep down a washboard of ruts, shifts into four-wheel drive, then low gears it up another rib-rattling road to this unlisted land with a creek. He stops in front of a tangled heaps of windfall and old logging slash. After the engine dies and the tick-tick-tick of the cylinders cools, fades, the only sound are of boughs in breeze and water rushing. I follow Robin as he blazes through mazes of branch that scratch my bare legs bloody. At a lush clearing of lady and bracken ferns, we stop to see the sound we have been tracking. Whitewater swirls and steals in a steely pool just beyond our feet. I know sure as the ground beneath me, this is the spot I've been looking for. "I want to buy this land," I say to Robin. "It's not for sale," he says again. "Don't even know who owns it." Robin lifts his hat, wipes sweat from his vanilla brow, and also keeps his eyes focused on the bubbling water, and not me. Two small trout waver between the rock shadows in the pool, a languid gathering of glacial descent. Shoulder to shoulder, we stand reflecting down on this. So mesmerized, I notice only as we turn to leave a baby bird perched on a branch within an arm's reach. I extend my hand, and when it hops onto my finger, Robin snaps a photograph with my Kodak. He agrees to my request to contact the people who own this property with an omen on a branch. Back in town, Robin went to the courthouse and tracked down the owners of the land not for sale. They lived in California and were making plans to log the old growth. Prices for pine being what they were at that time. I wasn't privy to the entire conversation had with them, but by the end, they agreed to sell me 80 acres for $21,000. Cash. No contract. They wanted an answer by the end of the day. I had no idea what that land was worth or any thought of bargaining a counter, yet instinctively I knew its value to me. I used the phone in Robin's office to dial the trust officer. Collect. "Send me a check," I said. "For what?" replied the trust officer over a long-distance call. "For land on 80-acre mountainside with old-growth ponderosa pine trees and a creek." I added for effect. "I can't send you a check." "What do you mean?" "I signed a paper to sell my stock, the sale of which I planned to use to buy my land." This was true. I had signed the papers to sell my stock at that day's value that afternoon. I had left the conference room of men, but the trust officer didn't make it to exchange that day. But the next morning, shares had dropped a point. My signature had bound him to sell the stock at the rate it was on that late day in May. Since then, it had dropped point by point. Each and every day I was on the road. I pressed the phone to my ear hard enough to hear cartilage crunch and thought about the girl I had been. The girl who sang about choosing deep greens and blues. The moonlight girl who at night read a book written by a man, a hypocrite like me, pontificating simplicity while indulging inconveniences. For me, this included coin-operated showers and laundromats. For Thoreau, a washerwoman. During this time of seek and ye shall find, the enlightened time of reading and thinking about what I'd read at night while driving by day, and living off savings earned over 3 summers of performing minimum wage factory work. I was blissfully unaware the inheritance I was banking on to finance my dream was ebbing rapidly away because of something called Watergate and the resignation of a president. It was best to hold off selling the stock until it went up, insisted the trust officer. I put the receiver down and turned to Robin, who'd been pretending not to listen as he fiddled with papers on a metal-legged desk across the room. I couldn't ask him for advice. I just met him, and likely the only stock he was familiar with, mood. I walked out of Robin's office, sad and seething, sorry with indecisiveness. Should I wait for the stock to go up and lose out on buying this land? Decisions like this had pulled my father's mind, and now I felt this tug of war tearing at me. I was mad as hell that I'd naively driven across the country listening only to sweet songs and rereading Walden until the cover fell off, unaware the stock market was in a deep decline. Down the street from the real estate office is a coffee shop, Emery's Bakery Cafe. Is lettered on a window set into a red brick building. I go inside to nurse my think. Should I sell at a loss or hold out for more money and lose the land? I was told the stock was valued at around $30,000 when I inherited it. Surely its worth hadn't plummeted too much since I was on the road. It's lunch hour and the cafe is busy. There's an empty stool at the counter. I sit, pull some paper napkins from a dispenser, and begin whisking crumbs away from the space in front of me. Here, I'll do that. A bald-headed man wrapped in a stained bib apron appears. He wipes the counter square in front of me with a hygienically questionable rag. Want to see a menu? He asks. No, thank you. Just some coffee and one of those. I point to the 4-tiered bakery window case next to the register. One entire shelf is lumped with these sugary brown pastries, knobby as a Sasquatch fish. The man twirls a toothpick between his lips, reaches into the case, and places what I will later learn is a fritter on a white plate, then pours me a cup of watery coffee. Up and down the counter, men wearing hats, dirty as their shirts, smoke, drink, eat. Nearby tables and booths are filled, and other men in cleaner, stiffer Western-cut shirts, and a few women in dresses and skirts. At first I was sure I drew stares when I walked into Emery's, but then I looked around. Everyone was focused on what they were eating, drinking, or smoking, and not on my cutoffs. Or my long brown hair, kinky from sleeping on it wet. By the time I paid the check, I decided to sell my stock at a loss. Sure, I'd get enough to cover the cost of 80 acres. Robin let me use his phone again to call the trust officer. By then I was sure the agent had second thoughts about working with a kid, a fraud at that. I told him I had money to buy land when I actually didn't. I hadn't learned the 3M stock hadn't been sold and didn't know that, like my father's spirit, the stock had sunken to an all-time low. Over the telephone in Robin's office, I tell the trust officer loud enough for the agent to hear, "Sell all the 3M stock today and mail me the check." I give him the real estate office address and then replace the receiver, sticky with fritter glaze. I ask Robin to call the sellers to tell them I will pay full price, as I'm certain the stock proceeds will cover the purchase of the property. Robin assures me it's okay to camp on the land until the check arrives. He leans into the desk and its metal legs squeak as he pencils out a little map, in case I've forgotten to find my way back. Even with all the gears in sync, the grade is too steep. The gremlin chassis rides too low to avoid bottoming out on roads, ruts, and gullies on the road with 2 cattle gates, each which needs to be opened and closed to get up or down the road, whether there are grazing animals about or not. The first gate is green painted steel, hinged and secured by a bolt. The other is held tight by barbed wire and a rough-cut pole set into rocky ground next to a rose-hip thicket. I park the gremlin just above the first gate in a meadow and fill my backpack with everything I need to stake my claim 2 miles up. I will continue to hike up and curse with all my anger when the opportunity to negotiate this road from the wheel of a truck finally arrives. The only time I break stride is to unlatch the rose-hip gate. By late afternoon, shadows lengthen. The warm air is sugary sweet. I drop the pack by the creek on land, 3 signatures and 1 check away from escrow before I can honestly say, this is mine. I pitch the tent, make a fire from dry bank rock, and begin a never-ending lesson in learning to listen to this land. I settle into a routine I will repeat for 5 days. The only person who knows where I am is a realtor in a cowboy hat. The baby bird is gone. In my backpack is a sketchbook, along with 3 repetigraph pens, a bottle of indelible drafting ink. I trace the small, nesting aluminum camp pots and spend unmeasured hours filling empty circles with drawings of trees on the creek, which is impossible to draw because it won't stand still. In the afternoons, I hike among juniper and craggy serpentine hillsides, disturbed only by the occasional magpie or goshawk cry, and draw croppy outrocks, vistas blurred by atmosphere. The days are hot, and most of the time I wear only cutoffs and a pair of Minnetonka moccasins, and my back burnishes to the color of buckskin on my feet. I belly down to drink from the creeks and snack under old-growth ponderosa pine or juniper trees. I eat cheese and crackers and apple, 1 of 5 stored in my tent and rationed out 1 apple a day. The fruit like sand in an hourglass. When the last one is eaten, it will be my time to go to town. All right, here I'm going to just show you a couple of the sketches that I was doing at this time. When the shadows grow long and dense enough to trip over, I return to camp each day, put on a long-sleeve shirt, gather sticks, snap branches underfoot, and build a fire. I heat water to wash away dust from my face, elbows, and belly, and steep Lipton chicken noodle soup in a green plastic cup. Fresh-faced, I slurp the broth and suck the noodles. From my little spot by the creek, I focus on the distant light, closing in a fist of night. When the fire burns to embers, I douse it with the same pot I've used to heat water before zipping into a tent. and dreaming about baby birds rather than axe murderers. At first light, I unzip myself, first from the sleeping bag and then from the tent to greet the creek so loud it drowns out birds singing. I kneel beside the bank, dunk my head, scrub my face, and mix instant coffee in a cup that flavors of chicken soup. I review the previous day's sketches and then in a journal make note of my surroundings. At mid-morning, I stuff Triscuits, cheese, and 1 apple into a knapsack along with my pens and paper before I head for the hills far enough away from the creek I can hear birds singing. For 5 days, I plan to draw and write in the light of day. At night, watching the campfire die down, I have to look at me. If I were to begin painting the portrait of who I am now at 18, I would block in shadows and lay down a dark underpainting, beginning with bent black. Bent black is the color of an elm branch I sat perched on 4 years earlier, jutting over the partly frozen Minnesota River. It was March, when the river ice chucks, breaks, cracks up, and heaves downstream. A month earlier, my mother had died. I was drinking scotch straight from the bottle that I was not old enough to buy. The drink kindled fire where there was cold. Within a snowball's throw of my perch at this riverside park was a family. They had not ventured past the signs, danger, unstable bank, posted above the river. They were making a family of Papa, Mama, and baby snow angels. In the matching blue snowsuits, the family looked like Michelin men flapping about on their backs. Near the family was a picnic table. On it was a thermos the color of their snowsuits. It was filled with hot chocolate. I knew this from a distance, measured by how far I could throw a hard-packed snowball. Sweet steam clouds rose from mugs and evaporated before they reached me. One child, I couldn't tell whether boy or girl all through all the bundling, dripped sweet brown eyes into the snow angel's head. This is how I knew for a fact, even at a distance, there was hot chocolate in those cups. Drinking antifreeze in the company of angels and an early spring breakup, I shivered beyond danger signs. Maybe the nice family would look up into the tree and invite me over. I would flap out angels on my back alongside them, and our laughter would make me forget how I got out on a limb. I swigged another burning sip and watched the happy family with steaming mugs. I'd rather be sipping hot chocolate, but no one offered me a cup. Now I've put myself out on another limb of sorts, hanging tight to the thought that I might own this spot where evergreen branches bow low. 5 nights in a row, I squat there beside the creek, stab sticks into the coal, stir up flames, and in this light continue to think about other colors that made me. I list them mentally. Inheritance grab greed. An uneven blend of raging reds. Foster parents' folly. An incestuous smoky scumble of contradictory values. I've been around the block, black and blue. Are you my mother? Hello, Kitty Pink. Burnt green fried tomatoes, a putrid shade of green. These blends cannot be off the shelf or squeezed from tubes, spooned from jars. They are a custom mix of dark hues, convoluted hues, with names that brand in the wrong ways. The statutes of limitations on these colors may have expired, but they have a shelf life of their own. The palette to paint the portrait girl sitting around campfire stirring coals would include other unnatural colors never brought up in polite company. And other colors too, a solid earthly mix of family values reflecting the foundation laid by caring family and parents. Even though it was cracked irreparably when my father first toyed with suicide. I wouldn't be stirring coals and old memories on this mountainside if my father hadn't tried to kill himself 3 times. His final suicide attempt lacked the required acceleration to total more than the company car, a powdered blue compact Dodge Dart. Instead of dying in that joyride of depression, he landed in a place where men with listless expressions shuffle around in light gray terry cloth robes all day long. In this place where my father is safe from sporting about with death, there is an outdoor shuffleboard court. My brother, sister, and I play there one afternoon while our mother sits with her husband, whose face has been realigned by electricity. The rings around his eyes dark as the pucks we push to score. After that visit, my mother takes the 3 of us to a park where there are oak trees and leaves around that sound, depending on the wind, like breaking waves or starched petticoats rustling. She gives each of us a wax-coated cup filled with Laura Scudder's potato chips and the directions, "Go and play, but not too far away." I skip down a slope, dropping chips behind me to lay a trail I will retrace through a cluster of oaks so gargantuan, I just know there are elves rooted inside planning a prank or two over a wee pot of tea. The slope ends abruptly at a brambly embankment and stops short of a languid creek. The water is slate-gray silent, only a mumbled gurgle and a slurp. I am out of chips. My pedal pushers and blouse soon soak into the muddy bank as I belly down to watch the flow. The creek burbles by and breaks into bubbles at a bend. A gray bird bursts through brush and lands smack on the bloated side of a dead fish floating by. My first thought is, life feeds on death. Or maybe it was death feeds life, or something along the lines that doesn't wear out the letter B. After all, I'm only 9 years old, and my prepubescent metaphors, like my breasts, are far from developed. On my belly, I study the twitchy bird, the dead fish, with one milky eye focused up instead of where it is going, around the bend. My name trickles through the breeze. The 3rd time I hear it's called, it is about the time the bird breaks wind and the fish floats out of sight. Brushy-tailed squirrels and rascally chipmunks have trotted away with my potato chip trail. Or maybe it really was elves. Still, I find my way back, and we drive in the family car, a white Chevrolet Impala, safe as a tank. Between the garage and the backyard fence of the sunny California home, I've built a fort. It's a mishmash of boards scrounged from vacant lots where blue-bellied lizards sun. I taught myself how to work a ball-peen hammer, breaking 2 fingers as I nailed together a rickety box tall enough for me to sit up in. Shaded by a grapefruit bush, I read and draw pictures inside the secret fort everyone knows about. Creek mud still on my knees and caked into the surgical tape splintering my fingers on the non-drawing hand. I pencil outlines of a bird and a fish after our family outing. A cocktail napkin-sized Jolly Roger flag is planted in a crack overhead, the slit gaping enough I can see my brother swipe the feared symbol on a stick, his childish plunder an omen, really, of a death wish he labors with from birth. My brother waves the skull on the crossbone and taunts, "Come and get it!" I crawl out of the fort and chase him across the patio into the house. Skidding to a halt in the kitchen, I see my mother cradling the turquoise wall phone and watch her as her eyes and her head slumps against the wall. He died, didn't he? My voice clear as a declaration of what I already knew. My father's heart has flown the coop. A little bird told me so. Within days, the Los Gatos driveway, normally a maze of 4 square and hopscotch chalk grids, is a pier of clothes, dishes, stemware, green depression glass tumblers, Crisco brown cupcake pans and cookie sheets, and furniture smelling too new to attract bluebelly lizards. The Jolly Roger flag is planted atop this Everest of my father's electric shock passing. Everything not in the familiar heap is packed into a Mayflower moving van, except the Impala. Along with all my father's belongings, the car is given to priests who live in silence in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We leave the city after named for cats and board a flight to Minnesota to live in a city named after the spirit of a fighting bear, where there are relatives to shelter the survivors of a train wreck forever reacting. Los Gatos is a place I recall with no redeeming value except for that fort. That fort, like the family I once had, like my campfire now, is pretty much dead. As I prepared to douse the smoldering coals that 4th night by the creekside camp, something on the hillside to the right of the tent catches my eye. I step away from the flames and see the moon easing through the forest. It spotlights an opening between the trees, and I think, that's where I'll build my log cabin. The moon arcs and sinks into the forest as I stir a 3rd pot of water into the coals. For good measure, I dump a 4th until every coal is black and bobs in the pit. I zip into the tent, then into my bag, and turn my back on the dark. I'm too excited to sleep. In the morning, I will meet my realtor in a cowboy hat. I sit up, listen to the creek, and eat my last apple. 5 business days after I've staked a tentative claim to this land I want to own, which after only 1 day began to own me, I meet Robin in his office. On his desk is a registered letter addressed to me. I opened it and I want to cry. After commissions, I've pocketed just over $17,500 for the 3M stock. I've got a couple $100 in a checking account. That's it until my mother's side of the estate is settled, which could take years if there's anything left of it by the time I pay attorney fees. I sit with that check in hand, the most money I've ever owned, but it's still not enough. Robin gets on the phone, explains the situation to the owners. He manages a twist in transactions. They will take a promissory note for $3,500, due 1 year in full from the date the deed is signed. With my promise and a check for $17,500, I leave Robin's office and drive back to Minnesota to sort out the rest of my life. Not quite as broken as before. I found this land. Thank you for listening to Chapter 3. We will get into Chapter 4 next week. And by that time, even though I'm comfy in my little efficient house in the Dalles, Oregon, there could be a foot or two of snow up at the cabin, which leads me to recall, how the heck did I live up there during the winter? Anyway, enjoy your favorite libations, hydrate this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Oh, I always forget this because, I'm still, lighting kerosene lamps at the cabin. So I have to remind you to subscribe to my podcast and my YouTube. It requires electricity. You can't get it up by lighting a kerosene lamp. Enjoy your libation. Ma salama habibtis.